Fridays at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show. As you can see from right there, Colton McKivitz has signed. And what's up, Paul? How's it going? Welcome to chat. Colton McKivitz re-signs and re-ups to come back to the 49ers. It's a 2-year deal that's going to put him in San Francisco through the 2024 season, which means potentially the 49ers have the right tackle position locked up. This could be the direction they go. Will they still look to go for a player like Caleb McGarry? I think we're going to find out. From everything I heard on KNBR, it seems like Mike McGlinchey is on his way out, and the 49ers are making another move. Paul says, "Hey, Ant, good to see you on and alive for real." Yeah, I'm live. I think the lives are going to kick up a little bit over the next couple weeks or whatever. I've taken some time and relaxed and enjoyed some time, so I had to record kind of on my own schedule, and sometimes that's a little bit difficult. I work nights, so it's a little bit difficult when my work schedule compared to when I can go live. But yeah, I'm live and I'm excited. I'm excited to talk 49ers football. What's up, traffic? First off, about Colton McKivitz, because I know this video is about edge rushers, and I can't really get in, or I can't wait to get into that and some of the other guys as well. And what's up, Randy Daytona? How's it going? But McKivitz, it's really one of those things that was inevitable. He was a restricted free agent. You know, they were probably going to, put a tender on him. Now they don't. They have an extension there. It's a done deal. Colton McKivitz back in San Francisco. Realistically, the right tackle of the upcoming season, probably. And I think now the 49ers can move forward with how they handle their center position with, probably a look at Jake Brendel. And then after that, how they feel about Nick Bosa. Potentially going in there and taking that role, or bringing back Daniel Brunskill. But I think this was the first one that had to fall. The first domino had to be securing Colton McKivitz, even though you probably were going to get him on a 1-year deal. Getting him on a 2-year deal is smart because it keeps you, relevant to make sure you have him through the 2024 season. Paul says, is McKivitz going to be a starter? I would say I lean towards the positive right now, minus them going out and signing a offensive tackle like Caleb McGarry or someone like that. I do believe that Colton McKivitz will be a starter. I think there'll be a competition between him and probably, like Randy Daytona said, Brunskill coming back. There could be a competition there. Brunskill is somebody that they definitely need to bring back with that 5-position versatility. Of course, Chris Foerster said during the year that if Brunskill is really out of position at center, but he can do it. He's definitely more comfortable at guard. I think guard is his actual position, but we've seen him have success at tackle as well. In 2019, Daniel Brunskill was fantastic for the 49ers at the tackle position. First, being out there, and they had, a bunch of guys hurt, including Joe Staley, and McGlinchey as well. So, and he was able to take the helm and do those roles. And then the next year slide into a starting right guard job. And I thought he did a very good job. I look for the 49ers to try to bring him back. I don't know what the market will look like for Daniel Brunskill out there. I don't expect it to be a huge market, but when you have that kind of potential, I'm sure he's valuable to somebody, especially when you have former 49ers coaching out there, and John Benton, especially with the New York Jets. I'm sure he would love to get, Daniel Brunskill to come up there and play for the New York Jets, having all that position versatility. Houston Texans, I'm sure Slowey would love to get him there so he could help, and even Mike McDaniel in Miami. So there will probably be some suitors for Daniel Brunskill because of versatility, but we'll see what his number looks like. Kyle Shanahan is the one that believed in him before, and I think that he likes Chris Foerster. Not as much as Jake Brendel likes Chris Foerster, because Jake Brendel loves Chris Foerster. What's up, JLE? How's it going? Yeah, always good to be live. I enjoy the lives. I enjoy interacting with everyone that's on here. But yeah, so Colton McKivitz back to San Francisco. Not a big move, not a splashy move, but I think overall direction-wise, we've seen the 49ers do this before. with Daniel Brunskill. Daniel Brunskill just going to be the guard. Person's gone, Brunskill. And you've seen this happen from year to year. Alex Mack is gone. They got to make a big move. It ends up being Jake Brendel. Not a big move, but Brendel plays pretty good. Not great, but good. So I think we've seen this in the past, and I think that's why it's going to continue to be Colton McKivitz. That is probably going to be the right tackle, leaving Spencer Burford as the right guard. Paul says, I think Brunskill comes back because Shanny loves him as a utility lineman. I'm with you. And he made about $2.4 million last year. He was a restricted free agent. They weren't able to work out a long-term deal or a 2-year deal like they did with Colton McKivitz last year for Daniel Brunskill, but they were able to get that done with McKivitz. So Brunskill is going to test free agency. I think we'll get a good idea of what his market is, as the free agency goes. I don't think he'll be a first wave or second wave guy. Now, the 49ers still have the weekend, to potentially work on deals for their players and try to get them done before they ever hit free agency. Because once they hit free agency, you don't know what teams are going to be interested, and then overall what money is going to be put there. So what's up, Fork? How's it going? Welcome to chat. And thanks, Kylie. Says dig in the all red. Yeah, I had to go all red. I'm going Bosa. Most of the guys who are cut and in the cap room are edge rushers. So I wanted to go with something opposite of Nick Bosa and what that was going to look like. So I was having a fun with that, and I just really like this hat too. It's just one of my favorite hats that I have in my hat collection. But thanks everyone for coming through, of course, and this is going to be a fun interaction. Let's talk about some of these players, that are going to be available on the open market. And it's right now, there's some that aren't official, of course. There are rumors, of course, of guys getting, released and becoming cap casualties. And if you guys have people that you want to talk about, it doesn't matter what position. I'm going to put some of my focus on edge rusher because I believe that's the number one concern for the 49ers is an edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa and being able to get a talent level that can produce a lot for that defensive line, who I felt took a little bit of a step back in the pass rush department. And I think they want to get that going again. So some guys were already released, and we're going to get into those, especially the ones who were released. I think the number one guy is Frank Clark. And the reason I say number one is because he is officially been released by Kansas City. And his market value is going to be about $12 million. Well, that's double what you paid for Samson Ebukam. But with Frank Clark, you're getting something completely different because Frank Clark has a lot of ability. He's still not quite 30 years old, even though he will turn 30 years old, this upcoming season. I think he's somebody the 49ers have been interested in. And the 49ers have been interested in getting guys that have the ability to put pressure on the outside. Now, was his season, fantastic? I think, that's something that we can talk about because I don't think you're really looking for somebody that had a fantastic season. You're looking for someone that could have a fantastic season. So he only had 5 sacks. So if you're looking at overall numbers, you're not going to get, what you're looking for as far as that's not better than Samson Ebukam did last year. But I think there's the potential there, for him to do a lot more because he's one of those guys that's had a lot of success for many years where, Samson Ebukam, 5 sacks was his career high. So I think that's to remember as well when it comes to, what is going to happen here with Frank Clark and the ability that he's going to have. And of course, he's been in the league for a while, been in the league since 2015, where he started with Seattle Seahawks. And he's had some years where he's had, some big time output. Double-digit sacks twice in his career, and those were good seasons. One in 2016 and one in 2018, where he had 14 sacks. That got him the big contract, with the Kansas City Chiefs. And since then, he's cooled off a little bit. See his stat numbers go down, but I definitely think he's somebody the 49ers would be interested in bringing in because he's got a lot of ability and able to bring some pressure off the outside. So I think that he's somebody that, that they like, and that's what Bobo says, Frank Clark available. Yeah, he's available. Porkdal says, how do you feel about McKivitz? I'm kind of on the fence, but hopeful he will continue developing. Yeah, I think that he got a wake-up call in 2021 when they didn't put him on the 53-man roster. He had to go to the practice squad and earn his way. But I thought last year when he had his opportunities, I thought he did good. In 2021, I thought he did really good against a very good pass rush that included Von Miller against the Rams. So I think, is he a finished product? No, but has he been improving since Chris Foerster has got his hands on him and since Colton McKivitz realized he was going to have to really put forth a tremendous effort to be a player in this league? I think so. I think that was a wake-up call for him, and since then he's improved rapidly. So I'm definitely more confident with Colton McKivitz as a starter this year than I would have been even, say, last year. But I definitely think the 49ers need to continue to draft and develop more players so that way they can ensure that they have a right tackle they can count on. Now, Colton McKivitz graded out better than Mike McGlinchey in the pass game, but in the run game, he's not as efficient as a blocker as McGlinchey was. So you're giving up something in the run game and gaining in the passing game. We'll see how that pans out, and if the 49ers feel like that's enough to continue with Colton McKivitz. Paul says, could Jackson improve enough and run defense on and off the field to fill the role? He could. I think that Drake Jackson is going to be a fine player in the league. I think I saw pretty good pass rush techniques. There's still some stuff with leverage, with his hands, his technique, that are definitely raw compared to others that come into this league. A lot of that, it could be the coaching he got at USC. In fact, I think it is. But also playing off-ball linebacker. They had him gaining weight. They had him losing weight. They did a lot of different things with him, and I just don't think that he was a finished product. And when I watched him play this season, was a guy that had some pretty good speed, definitely good bend around the corner. And when he rushed inside, I liked his ability against guards. I think where the problem comes in is, number one, he didn't have the strength to consistently win against anchoring offensive linemen. Number two, his technique needs to get better. And then when he did play the edge, like you brought up, Paul, he just wasn't able to set the edge the same way the other guys were. I felt more comfortable in a lot of defensive linemen that played on the 49ers setting the edge compared to him. And, of course, all of them have a lot more experience. But Bosa, Ebukam, Amenahue, Hyder, Jordan Willis, all those guys set the edge better than Drake Jackson. And that's why when it got into the playoffs, Drake Jackson wasn't active. We know Kyle Shanahan talked about his body, and he's got to continue to improve his body. I just think that he's got a ways to go as far as setting the edge. I think he'll work on it all off season, but I can't say with a 100% ability that he's going to be the guy on the edge, just going to be able to stop the run and be a 3-down defender. In fact, if I had to bet, I would think that Drake Jackson improves tremendously as a pass rusher, and I think he could even fit the Arden Key / Charles Amenahue role and play outside and inside this year. Especially playing inside on obvious pass downs as a guy that really comes in and helps in their more lightning package of defensive linemen. But I don't right now see him as a 3-down starter opposite of Nick Bosa. I think they'd be taking a huge chance. I think if they were going with just Drake, they would want to go with somebody ahead of him right now. That's just my opinion, and of course he could prove us all wrong. He could definitely prove us wrong. During training camp and then during the preseason and show that he's that guy. And if that's the case, well, bravo to the 49ers for getting that. JL says, not a big fan of Frank Clark as a person, but yeah, I think that's where the character things come in. And that's what Paul's saying as well. For the 49ers, character matters. And it does. I mean, so if, you're worried about Frank Clark's character, then he's not going to be an option for the San Francisco 49ers. You just can't go that route and think that he's going to be. But what would you guys think about a guy like Bud Dupree? Bud Dupree is a guy that, got a huge contract coming from Pittsburgh. He went to Tennessee. What do you think about him? And the fact that Bud Dupree, after just 2 years under contract with the Tennessee Titans, is being released and, put back on the market. I think that, his stats were down as well. Only 4 sacks. For Bud Dupree on the season. So you see the sack numbers went down when he got, away from the Steelers and their system. When he got away from TJ Watt, the sack numbers went down. That's why their money is going down too. That's one thing I didn't bring up yet about Frank Clark, is Frank Clark's estimated market value is $12.4 million. I think that's a lot less than what he was going to make before. He was going to make close to over $15 million. So he's going to take a pay cut just getting out there on the open market. So potentially, Bud Dupree, who's already 30 years old, was scheduled to make over 16 million. What's his market value going to be? I'm guessing it's going to come down. I'm guessing out of the guys that have been cut so far, Bud Dupree is probably going to be 13, 14 million as well. But you see their numbers drop. Samson Ebukam had 5 sacks last year, so more production than both of them. I think the only thing that's difference between the two we've talked about with Frank Clark and Bud Dupree compared to Samson Ebukam is the fact that those two have already produced double-digit sack years in their career, where when it comes to Samson Ebukam, he maxed out his total number of sacks with 5 this year. It was 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, and then 5. So I think that that's something to remember when you're looking for that elite guy on the opposite side. Sometimes the ability to be elite is so important. But I do understand what everyone's talking about with character issues. And if character is an issue with Frank Clark, let's wipe him out. I don't have a problem for that either. And JLE says Larry Ogunjobi. You know what? Larry Ogunjobi, interesting name out there, that potentially could be available. See, he's 29 years old. Larry Ogunjobi was a very, very cheap player last year overall for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I want to look and see what Ogunjobi's market value is. Thanks so much, Spotrac, for this. Larry Ogunjobi's market value, $3.4 million. So he's definitely cheap as a guy that can, that could come in and play. He's definitely a different style of player than, we've talked about with the other guys, where, Ogunjobi is as more of a base 4-3 defensive end and less of an edge guy that can put a lot of pressure with speed on the outside. I think that's one thing I've been looking for is speed on the outside. So that's something to remember. And what is up, Freddie McDre? How's it going? Glad to see you in the chat. Porknell says, I like Morris out of Michigan. He's big and could be a good run stopper and maybe get some sacks too. He struggled at the combine, so he may drop. Combine is cool, but not actual football. Yeah, I agree with that. And there's a ton of guys, that are already in the draft that the 49ers can definitely go after as well. I think it's going to be a combination of things. I think if they're going to spend, they want to spend at the edge rush position for a free agent, because getting someone opposite of Bosa, we've seen that's been a priority before with D Ford. So if you can work out a contract with a player coming in, that works out to where you have a low number this year and the number goes up a little bit next year, that can work, because D Ford's $8 million is going to come off as well next year. There's $8.4 million in dead cap space coming from D Ford's contract this year. So you could potentially go that way, but I expect them to go with, some guys as well. And if you have over on Patreon, I started doing my star player reports. I've put out 3 so far: a safety, a wide receiver, and an edge rusher. And the star player that I went over was Zach Harrison. So if you want to see those breakdowns, go over to Patreon. Those are there. I've been working on some other ones. I'm working on a tight end right now that I'm going to be putting out in the next several days. And there's just going to be more and more draft content. I'm going to put a lot of that over on Patreon. Some of it will be here, of course. But if you want those in-depth looks, they're going to be over on Patreon as far as like individual breakdowns. So those are available. And I mean, that's the thing. I do think it's going to be edge rushers. We've heard lots of people talking about, Isaiah McGuire. I like Zach Harrison. There's other guys in this as well, like Nkum. Lots of really good edge rushers that potentially Carl Brooks that the 49ers could look at and pick up during this draft. And now that, the number of picks came out and the 49ers have 11, including 99, 101, and 102. In that into the third round area, I think that's where the 49ers can go ahead and take on some players there. Let's see. WTM says, which position is our biggest need? I think it is defensive line right now. I think they've shored up the right tackle spot with Colton McKivitz, or at least that's how they feel right now. We'll see if they do something and go Caleb McGarry or, something else along those lines. I don't think there was really a big-time option available once Taylor Lewan indicated he did not want to move from left tackle to right tackle. There wasn't a real option on the free agent market that's better than what you had with Mike McGlinchey. So you're not going to improve at the position. Why not stand pat, especially if you don't believe McGarry is that much better than Colton McKivitz? So we'll see. We'll see. And yeah, JLE says can play that inside outside. Yeah, you can play inside outside. I like those, the flexibility from Ogunjobi. And there's other guys too. Like you bring up Greg Gaines. I think those guys are possibilities, especially in cheaper ways. The 49ers like to go cheap. I think I was just looking for a specific thing because in 2019, the reason that the pass rush was so good was Bosa and Ford together absolutely went after quarterbacks. I mean, D Ford's ability, and there's not very many D Fords in this league, but finding a guy that has that speed opposite of Bosa, I think they were hoping that with Ebukam. I mean, Ebukam has all those abilities and speed. And I like Charles Omenihu. I don't think Omenihu has the same ability, that we see from that, and from them. So yeah. And Lou says, "Hi, It. Damn, I'm late. Hi, TCC. How's it going?" Yeah, how's it going? And Jaylee says, bigger DNs that can, if needed, move inside like Hyder. Yeah, I like those as depth pieces. So I think all the guys you're talking about is depth. You see that with Jordan Willis. I think that's what Charles Omenihu really is. I like those kind of guys that can play outside and inside, a lot like what they did with Eric Armstead. So in those cases, you're looking if you're looking in the draft, you're looking for guys can play 5 tech in the NFL, those kind of inside out guys. Of course, in the 49ers wide 9, it makes it a little bit more complicated when they become a tweener. Because they, can they get home from being that far outside of the offensive tackle? I think that's a question. Or if you get the speed, you could definitely get it done. Lou says highlights, please. I put the highlights on those videos of the star players. I know David Campbell really enjoyed them. I gotta get back to him, but he really enjoyed what I've showed him so far. So check those out if you have a chance. Bubba says my biggest wish is somehow get Buckner back. I don't know what's going to happen with the Buckner contract, but I mean, he's locked into Indianapolis right now. If they decide to move on, I'm sure a lot of teams would be interested. The 49ers don't really have the financial wiggle room to add another big-time interior defensive lineman. I think they'd rather pay an edge rusher. I think that's where they value the most. So, yeah. What's up? DZ says, good to see you, Ant. Do you think we're keeping Jimmy Ward? I thought it was out of the question last week. I did not think Jimmy Ward wanted to come back and play nickel. I didn't think the 49ers financially were going to pay him top safety money that he was going to want. Of course, what he said on Instagram Live this week is that he would be considering playing nickel for the 49ers if he couldn't find what he was looking for in the open market. So it's a saturated safety room. There's some big-time players out there. We saw Jaquiski Tartt go into that market last year and then end up on Philly on a minimum deal and then out of the league. I don't think Jimmy Ward would have that happen. He's too versatile. But with Ward, he might not find the market he's looking for, and that could be what he's saying. If I can't find that market, coming back to the 49ers, for $6.5 million, which would be top of the line nickel money, I think he would do that. And I think in that case, the 49ers might consider it. But $6.5 million is still a lot of money to pay. That probably means you don't get Emmanuel Moseley back. So I don't know if the 49ers decide to go Ward and let Moseley slide. And maybe they're really comfortable with Deommodore Lenoir and Samuel Womack. And if that's the case, then yeah, you could probably move on. So it'll probably be and or Emmanuel Moseley or Jimmy Ward. But until this week, I did not think that was a possibility for Ward to come back. But now that he sort of softened his stance, I think it's a possibility. Lou says, who's playing the 1? Well, I think right now you got to think Javon Kinlaw is going to be playing the 1. I think they need to re-sign Hassan Ridgeway. If I was them, I would re-sign Hassan Ridgeway to play the 1 as well. And then I'd let Kalia Davis come in and battle for that position. We'll see what the upside of the young player looks like Davis is a slasher, more of the DJ Jones style. I thought Ridgeway did a very good job. And then I think the 49ers go ahead and draft a defensive tackle as well. I think those are options. I don't look for the 49ers to pay a lot of money to an interior defensive lineman in free agency. I don't see it. I don't think there's as big of a need. I think they're going to go with cheaper options. And I think one of those options will be Hassan Ridgeway. They can kick him a little bit extra money, but I thought he played really good against the run. And you know what you're getting out of him. You're pulling him off the field in obvious pass downs anyways. So you let him be a 2-down player, stop the run, get him off the field, make the same way with Kinlaw, and then you go ahead and you roll with Kalia Davis and Kevin Givens and Maurice Hurst if you can bring him back on another cheap deal. And you see what you can get out of those guys, all the while drafting a defensive tackle like Dante Stills, or Pickens or somebody like that they can use down the line. Bobo says, hopefully Drake Jackson steps up in year 2. I look for Drake Jackson to have improvement. I think Drake Jackson will be better this year. I look for his sack numbers to go from 3 to potentially 5 plus. Especially if he fits into that Arden key role and plays a lot of those interior snaps on obvious pass downs. I think his speed is enough to handle guards. And if his strength is up to the level and expectation that they want, I think his low pad level, his bend, his athletic ability will make him very tough to deal with. That's why I would love for them to get one of these edge rushers, that we're going to talk about here that have been cut to potentially put outside. That way Drake Jackson could be dominant on the inside. Who are some of these other guys that they could potentially go for? We talked about Bud Dupree and Frank Clark, but now the new one is Za'Darius Smith. And you might say, hey, Za'Darius Smith hasn't been cut yet. Yes, you're right. And actually, I've been working on a video that I've been trying to get together for a while, but now I'm going to talk about it here. Is Za'Darius Smith was thought to potentially be a cap casualty, because it would save a lot of money, and they basically did a potential out. This is an out year where they only get hit with a $3.3 million cap hit, so they save over $12 million. So that's why Minnesota, it made a lot of sense. Now, Minnesota says they were going to keep him. Well, today, Za'Darius Smith went to the front office, according to Adam Schefter, and said that he wants to be released. The reason I was coming up with this video is a week and a half ago, I read an article because I've been going around surfing, trying to find out about these edge rushers, and Za'Darius Smith has been on my list of players to watch. He put his house up for sale over 2 weeks ago. So Za'Darius Smith is definitely looking to move on from Minnesota. Talking about a guy that's 30 years old, going to be 31, but I mean, still got a lot of potential. A speed rush guy off the outside. What will his cap number look like? I think that's a bigger question. He was scheduled to make a good sum of money this year, and I think he's going to look for a little bit more. So his base salary was going to be about $9.5 million. Could the 49ers convince him to take a lower amount like he did with Minnesota last year, where his base salary was about $1.4 million, and then it jumped up? Could they convince him to take a low number like that, come in and potentially go after a championship, and then let his money be bigger down the line? I think it's a possibility. So to me, he's a guy that could be cut. He gave a farewell on Twitter to players, coaches, fans, and I think he wants out of there, and I think he's going to try to push their hand, and we'll see if he's able to get out of there. But he's a guy I'm tremendously interested in potentially getting out, because if you could get him and put him alongside some of these other guys, I think he would be just him and Drake Jackson and Bosa rushing on third down would be absolutely nasty. Let me know what you guys think about him, as well as I go back to the chat and see what's going on. And then Jaylee says, what D tackle should the Niners be looking at? I think there's a couple of guys. I like Stills. I like him a lot. I think, when I saw the 49ers were potentially interested in Stills, he was a guy that I went and watched film of. I remember that, there was another Stills that came out of West Virginia. I don't remember if they're brothers or, relation of some sort, but I thought both of those guys were pretty good. So I will, let me look at this. Let me bring up the defensive tackles real quick, and try to go through a couple of guys that I like. There's been some guys too that I've been watching that I think are more like, transitional guys, like guys that can do both. You know what I mean? And I think that is something I'm also looking at. Like, I know Carl Brooks is another guy that I think can play inside and out. I like him a lot. So he would be a guy that I'd be interested in the 49ers getting. Right now, he's kind of going to be available at the end of the third round. So that's a guy that, that definitely I'm paying attention to. And I think that finding guys later on, he's out of Bowling Green. Finding guys later on is something that the 49ers are going to have to do in this draft, because, most of their picks are just at the bottom half. They have one top 100 pick in this entire draft. And I don't think you can really build, very much. I've heard lots of people talking about, the Texas guys, Coburn, Ojomo, those guys. The 49ers met with Zach Pickens from South Carolina. I watched him. He plays big. But I like Brooks better than him so far. So, I mean, I like the edge guys a lot better than the defensive tackles that are in this draft. I've seen a couple of guys that I'm going to be putting as my draft diamonds. There's a couple diamonds I found already. So I'm not going to get into those guys too much, but there's some guys later in this draft, defensive tackle, but this is not exactly the best defensive tackle market that I've seen for the draft so far. Edge rusher, definitely. Tight end, I think, is the best tight end group that I've seen in a long time. So that's exciting if you're going to tackle that. But yeah, so Stills, I think Brooks, and Pickens, I think, are the guys the 49ers are potentially looking at right now, but we'll see. Hey, what's up, Tommy? Says, what's up, Pirate Ant? How's it going? Welcome to chat. Stoney says, I'm glad Christian is finally getting respect. Let's see. Forkdall says, I'm playing Kinlaw. Can someone redeem him next year, even if it's last with us? It would be huge. Yeah, I don't expect them to get the 5th-year option for Javon Kinlaw. I don't. So we'll see. WTM says, are we drafting a safety? I think it's a possibility. I have a safety that I really like that I think is going to be, especially after his poor performance in the combine, will probably be one of those guys. That's Trey Dean out of Florida. I like his ability, the things he's able to do, play in the slot. Originally a corner, but can do both. At 6'3", over 200 pounds, he's a heck of a hitter. He's a good tackler. So he's somebody that I like, and he's one of my star players, and I have a full breakdown on Patreon of him if you want to check it out. And then Jaley says, return of the Mac. What's up, Donald Johnson, by the way? How's it going? If you're talking about Khalil Mack, yeah, Khalil Mack is another one of those guys that's got to be on the list. Potentially he could be released. I've read, conflicting reports, but Matt Miyoko talked about the 49ers would have tremendous interest, in Khalil Mack. He's 32 years old now. I think the question about Khalil Mack, number one, will the Chargers be willing to release him? They just traded, a hefty haul to the Chicago Bears to pick up Khalil Mack. And then Mack had a very cheap contract last year, and it did jump. They would save, about $13 million if they release Khalil Mack. That's a good savings, especially for a team that is over the cap as of right now. But would they be willing to do that? I'm not sure. So I think that the questions about Khalil Mack being released still haven't been cleared. If he is cut, the 49ers will 100% be interested in Khalil Mack. Remember, it was John Lynch before the 2018 season that said they offered a better deal for Khalil Mack than the Chicago Bears did, but they were unable to get it done because the Raiders did not want to trade him to the San Francisco 49ers. So Khalil Mack would 100% be a target for the 49ers if he was released and is a cap casualty. I don't think that's even a question. And he was just playing with the Bosa. He knows what it's like. He could drive right up I-5 to Santa Clara and play for the San Francisco 49ers. I think they would love that. And if he was ring chasing, you potentially get him on a cheap deal, which I think could be huge for the 49ers as they're looking for guys that they could go ahead and target to play opposite of Nick Bosa. And if they can find that guy, what's up, Steve-O? If they can find a guy opposite of Bosa that can put a huge amount of pressure, I think that the defense will change in a big way, and they'll start making some big time plays. And I think that'll help the secondary as well. The secondary had to hold up a lot this season. Now, did they get pressures? Did they get hurries? Absolutely. Not a lot of those resulted in sacks if it wasn't Nick Bosa. Bosa, 18.5 sacks. Samson Ebicom, 5 sacks. Charles Omenihu, 4.5 sacks. The difference between the different ones is crazy. So I think that's something to remember too, is just they need an upgrade. They need a guy to go, up a little bit. And Jaley said, what your tight end choice? Are you talking about tight end in draft, or are you talking about tight end? Are you talking about tight end in the draft, or are you talking about tight end in free agency? Let me know what you had to say about that. And then I'll get into that a little bit. So yeah, I mean, there's some guys out there in the draft I think that I really like at the tight end position. And then I think that there's guys, that are going to be free agents. And, I did a free agent video earlier in the week, about tight ends. And, some people are like, hey, yeah, let's get the cheapest guys possible. And I think that's always a smart way to go when you're looking at free agency, unless you can, catch a guy, lightning in a bottle as it will be, and get a guy that can, make a huge impact on your team, like Robert Tonyan. Now, I don't know what his market's going to actually look like, but the rumors of it being $5 million, I would be very tempted to sign him to a deal. Robert Tonyan and George Kittle together would be the tight end duo that the San Francisco 49ers have always wanted, always needed. And I would be all in for that. I'm not always about spending money, but what do I care, right? It's not my money. But no, I think it would be a shrewd move if they could bring it in. That would definitely change the way Kyle Shanahan's able to run offense with those two tight end looks, with him and with Tonyan and Kittle both being able to block and catch passes. I think it would make the team even more dynamic than it already is. You have those two with Debo, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk, weapons on weapons. I think it makes it tough, especially when you have Kyle Juszczyk out there too. You can load up, you can do a lot of things. So to me, it gives them flexibility as well. One of each. Okay, so one of the tight ends that I really like, I talked about Tonyan now in free agency, but one of the guys I really like in the draft, I'm going to go with Will Mallory out of Miami. So Will Mallory, I was watching film of him and I really liked him. And then actually, I think he kind of got some people's attention in the combine when he ran a 4.5. And I happened to see the speed on film because he caught a couple balls along the sideline in one of the games I was watching, and he took off, and the defensive secondary was struggling to catch him. He was outrunning linebackers who had angles. They did ultimately run him down, but I was like, whoo. And then he went to the combine and he ran a 4.54. He was the fastest tight end at the combine, just barely edging out Zach Kuntz. And of course, Kuntz a little bit bigger. Mallory's only 6'4", where Kuntz is 6'7". I like Kuntz as well. But there's something about Mallory that I just really like. One of those guys that makes plays in the red zone. He's got, he's one of those guys that can find little holes in the zone and be able to get open. He's not had a lot of productions as far as TDs. Last year, he only had 3, but he had 42 catches for over 500 yards. So he's a guy that I really like. He's somebody that I liked just watching him overall. I thought his film, he wasn't one guy that I expected to grade out crazy good, but his athletic ability is very sneaky. He's got pretty good strength. He could probably put on 10 pounds, put him with George Kittle, let him put on 10 pounds of muscle. And next thing you know, you got yourself a very, very solid player behind George Kittle. I think he will be available when the 49ers want to draft in the 3rd and potentially even the 5th round, depending on, what happens. If he starts picking up steam, you just never know what's going to happen with one of these guys once they come out of the combine, how much they're going to jump. Now for like Zach Harrison, for instance, the defensive end I like out of Ohio State, he's 6'6", 275 pounds. He did not run. He did not do a lot of those things at the combine. He gets to his pro day and he runs the 4.4 like some are expecting, and he jumps out of the building. Then, right now you can get him on pretty much every mock draft somewhere in the, the late 3rd, early 4th round. And if he does those types of things where he shows that kind of speed with his wingspan being 87 and 36 and a quarter inch arms in length, I don't think there's any chance he gets out of the 2nd round. So some of the numbers will determine, of course, where these guys end up falling. I think, that's one of those things to remember. JLE says tight end Parham from the Chargers. Yeah, another guy that's an eligible guy. There was a lot of guys that were potentially going to be available in the free agent market that were low risk, high reward guys that I think you have a dual threat where they can block and pass that fit within the 49ers scheme. And I think he would be one as well. Tommy says Kincaid from Utah. Yikes, he is a beast. There's some big time players at the tight end position overall as far as, who's going to be available in the draft. I wonder how high some of these guys are going to go. I think we know that, Mayer, Darnell Washington, Dalton Kincaid, those guys are can't miss 1st and 2nd rounders. Luke Musgrave probably close to that, late or mid to late 2nd round. Tucker Kraft kind of in the same area. And then because of the way that Sam Laporta played, worked out at the combine, I look for him to also move up in this draft. So I think Sam Laporta is a guy that, potentially was a possible target for the 49ers with pick 99, 100, or 102. And now I think he could go, in the early 3rd round, early to mid, and be out of the reach of the San Francisco 49ers. So, but this tight end class, and, the 49ers met with Josh Wiley from Cincinnati. They've met with some of these other tight ends, including Laporta. So I think that those are some guys the 49ers are going to target overall in the draft. Yeah, Jelly said Laporta. Yeah, that's what I was. Donald says, guys, what position would you want them to target in free agency? Which position would you want them to target in the draft most? I want them to draft defensive linemen. This is a year you could load up on edge rushers, get a couple of guys. Some guys that could come in and compete behind Jordan Willis if you brought him back. Guys that could potentially beat out Kerry Hyder and give you more, edge ability. I think the 49ers need to find guys who have the ability to have a tremendous first step as far as speed, but also can set the edge. So finding those guys in this draft, I think there are some throughout the draft. There's some guys in small schools that you can get in the 6th and 7th round that could potentially redshirt, end up on your practice squad, and you could develop them for years to come. So I think that defensive line, both in free agency and draft, I think tight end and both in free agency and draft are areas you could go ahead and attack. I don't know how much the 49ers will be able to go offensive line, even though most fans want them to go offensive line in the first, as the first part of the free agency. I just don't know. So we'll see. JLE says thinking center. Yeah, potentially, right? Ethan Posich is a guy that people are talking about. The 49ers have been willing, to make some moves as far as centers go. If you're a channel member or you have me on or you have 49ers Cutback on Patreon, I did a draft video just talking about the things the 49ers do. And one of them is they don't draft centers in the draft. And we've been calling on it for a while, right? For the last couple of years, we've been calling them to draft Creed Humphrey or last year Cam Jurgens. There's been a lot of guys that everyone's been wanting them to draft, and they just haven't been willing to draft a center. So that's just something the Niners don't do. What have they been willing to do? They've been willing to pay them in free agency. In 2017, the 49ers came here. They had a holdover that they had a center already. In 2018, they went and got their guy in Weston Richburg. So they went from Kilgore to Richburg. Of course, he got hurt, but Kyle had already brought in Ben Garland, his guy from Atlanta that was a backup there in Atlanta for Alex Mack. He was able to play it. And then that once they realized Richburg couldn't go, they went to Alex Mack. He retired a little early. So their free agent wise, they've signed 2 high price free agents with Weston Richburg and Alex Mack. I think that's the way they normally like to go with center. But, with the center position, it's a little bit interesting because there's not that many centers that are available for the 49ers, to be able to get in free agency. It's not, there are guys, but you have guys that are considering, like Rodney Hudson's considering retirement. Connor McGovern's going to get a nice contract. Justin Brett just got released by Houston, but he's 32 years old. He could potentially go there. Let's look at Ethan Posich's number, $7.2 million. Are you going to pay your center $7.2 million? You can probably afford it now that you signed Colton McKivitz to an extension. So, that's a possibility. Maybe that is something the 49ers are going to do, is pay more at the center position because they're going to go cheap at right tackle. That's definitely a possibility. Of course, that they could have already taken care of this. It could be Poe. It could be Zakel. One of those guys. It could be Daniel Brunskill. I think those are things that they still, we're going to find out. JLE says E-Man coming back. I think they want E-Man back. I think one of the crazy things was, if you go to Spotrac, they say that Emmanuel Mosley has, I think his number's like $15 million on the open market. I don't see a team actually paying him that because he's coming off the ACL, but he did get hurt early on in the season, about 5 games in. So I do think that he will potentially come back. I think they want him to come back, and I don't think his market's going to be huge. I think if they could get him for the same amount of money they had him before, about $6.5 million, they'd be willing to do it. And you bring E-Man in, you have him compete with Deommodore Lenoir. If he beats Lenoir on the outside, you move Lenoir into the nickel. If Lenoir beats him out, you move E-Man into the nickel. And I think you feel confident with those two guys. I don't think Sam Womack showed enough yet to think he's the starter next year. I think he's got promise, and I think he could push for it. I just don't know if he could beat those two guys out right now. I think they're a little bit ahead of him. So potentially, those are guys that I think are possibilities, for I think he could come back, and then I think that's what could happen because of it. So, we'll see what happens overall with with E-Man. I hope E-Man comes back. I really like E-Man a lot. So I would love to get him back. Randy says, I think we're rolling with Mooney, Demo, Ambry, Womack. Yeah, I look for them to actually draft a corner as well in this draft, somebody that could potentially push Ambry Thomas. And I think also watch Quantrez Knight as potential to be able to get on this roster. I know Quantrez is not exactly an outside guy, but I think potentially they could bring him in to be in the nickel. And he's got great natural instincts. KDR says, do we draft or sign a kicker? I think they could do both depending on who they end up, getting. I know Matt Barrows came out and said it's still 50-50 about Robbie Gould, that this is probably a negotiating ploy or could be a negotiating ploy. I know he showed up at a Chicago Bears game, a Chicago Bulls game already. Potentially he could go to Chicago. They have plenty of money to give him. We know he wanted to go home. I thought it was 100% until Matt Barrows came out with that report. So I do think that they could go, where they sign. I think they want to keep the kicker amount low. And if they felt like they had a kicker in the draft that could be big time, go for it. It's definitely a taking a chance. I think it was Jordan Elliott, Splash Cousin, that did a article that talked about only one of the last 17 kickers taken in the draft have signed an extension and reached a second contract. That's not exactly a promising trend. So more than likely what the 49ers do is draft an undrafted free agent kicker and sign somebody else, and they let them compete to see who can win it out. Bobo says, I'm getting real sick and tired of losing NFC championships and Super Bowls. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a frustrating thing. It's one of the things it's a catch-22. You're happy to be in those situations because that means your team's a successful team and a successful organization, but you just want to get over the hump. You want to get over the top and win, and getting to that, last part makes the losses more difficult. It definitely does. It's a lot tougher than when you can kind of come to grips with losing multiple games and being a losing football team. So yeah, when you have such high expectations, it makes the fall a little bit more difficult. And I think that's what the 49ers are trying to come to grips with as far as getting a roster together that they could take advantage of and win a Super Bowl. And I think that every year they're trying to adjust and just go about, handling getting the best roster together. Eric, what's up? Eric Dane says, Ant, do you think Kalia Davis could break out this year similar to Hufanga last year? I don't know if we would get that similar of a output from Kalia Davis and break out, because Hufanga played a significant amount of snaps at the safety position in his rookie year. He played about 45% of the snaps with, pretty good success, especially in and around the blocks. So you knew Hufanga can make some plays. So I think Hufanga definitely had a step up on Kalia Davis. And I think also Hufanga's a guy that's been playing safety for a long time, all throughout high school, college. He's a guy that did it for a long time. Kalia Davis went to college as a linebacker and adjusted the defensive line. So I think he's got really raw skills. He's got tremendous athletic ability. He's been able to put on size on his frame, and I'm hopeful. I think Kalia Davis is probably going to be a rotational guy this year that could compete. Maybe he'll be a slasher that can make plays, but I want to see how he's able to hold up against double teams, and I want to see how his development is as far as he just learned how to put his hand in the ground 3-4 years ago. So he's got to learn how to get off the ball, and then I want to see what happens when he's in contact, how he reads, disengages, and make tackles. So I think it might be a little bit of a kind of a longer development for him, but I definitely like the player overall. Jimmo says Jacorian Bennett later in the draft. I like him. I do. I like him. I think he's a solid player. He's got pretty good hips. Showed us some pretty good speed and makeup speed. So yeah, he's a guy that's pretty good. And later in the draft, I think there'd be some value there for sure. Randy says drafting a kicker would be nice, cheap for a few years. That'd be very nice. I think that potentially you can find a kicker even after the draft. But with the 49ers having comp picks in the 7th round, 249, 255, they should be able to pick up somebody then and secure a kicker. It could be Moody, like Jimmo's bringing up. So maybe Moody, we'll see if he ends up getting drafted in the draft. You just never know. You're right. He could always get drafted. JLE says, any free agent wide receivers, or are they drafting one? I think they're going to draft one. I really do. I think they have some guys. They've met with a few guys. The two most notable, guys that they've met, of course, is Tank Dell, and I don't know how many guys have seen Tank Dell, but Tank Dell's got a lot of ability. I actually thought he was going to be a lot faster. His combine time was 4.5. For a guy that's 5 foot 10 and a half, 5'11", 165 pounds. You kind of expected him to be able to do more than that, but Nathaniel Tank Dell was highly successful in college. He had 18 touchdowns last year. One of those guys I love watching because he can create separation. So he's definitely exciting. And then the other guy that they talked to that I really like a lot, and in fact, he's one of my star players on Patreon, Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. He's 6'2", 225 pounds, and then went to the combine and ran a 4.46. I thought that was very, very good time for him. He's a pretty good route runner, needs to work on that a little bit. Makes some great catches. He can catch the ball without losing any momentum at all. He's a catch and run guy. It's very tremendous. Gives me AJ Brown vibes. I'm not saying he's AJ Brown. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that those guys are, I thought AJ Brown was special coming out, but I like all the things that Jonathan Mingo can do. So he's a guy that runs tough, plays tough, and he's got a lot of success. He's got questions a little bit about the hands sometimes. Sounds familiar, right? Jawan Jennings, Deebo Samuel. But with Mingo, I think it's more concentration and trying to become a runner before he secures the catch. And those are all things you can fix. I think Kyle Shanahan would be willing to take Mingo. Plus, one heck of a blocker and can pancake people. I'd be willing to take him in the 3rd round with one of those comp picks. I think he's got that much upside. We'll see if they do that. But, I mean, when you're looking at their wide receiver room, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, he got his exclusive rights free agent contract offer. That means he'll be coming back. Ray McLeod, and then Danny Gray. Those are your 5 guys. I think if you added a rookie, you could put a 6 wide receiver on your 53-man roster, leave them inactive, and just, see what you need as far as, practice squad stuff. But yeah, and Randy says undrafted running or quarterback for our 4th quarterback. Any names off the top of anyone's head? Maybe someone who started 3 to 4 years with a good completion percentage. I'll tell you who I like out of Minnesota is Tanner Morgan. I think he's the guy that's had a lot of success, and when he had big time talent, with other receivers there, Tyler Johnson and Bateman, he was highly successful. Threw for almost 4,000 yards. It's a lot like Brock Purdy as far as the numbers. Don't get me wrong. He's not Brock Purdy. He doesn't look like Brock Purdy. Doesn't throw like Brock Purdy. But as far as he had a very successful sophomore year, and then he kind of, struggled a little bit after that compared to what his previous numbers were. But what I like about him is timing in the pocket, gets rid of the football, has a strong enough arm to make all the throws on the field. He's not going to go out there and win any arm throwing awards. He's not going to run around, dance, and throw these crazy passes across his body. But I thought he had some consistency, and I seen what he could do when he had the talent that he needed on the football team. I think if you put him with a good running game, he could be successful enough to make some plays. What's up, Cole? Cole says, please don't take Za'Darius from us. Man, it looks like Za'Darius wants to leave. And, that's the thing. If Za'Darius wants to leave and he's interested in coming to San Francisco, would love to have Za'Darius Smith on the 49ers. I think him and Bosa would wreck shop together for a couple of years. So I'm good with that. And Jaylee says, bingo on Mingo. Love it. Yeah, he's one of my favorites in the whole draft for sure. Yeah, he's big time. And Randy says, nice one, Ant. Get Nick Mullins back from Jimmo. I don't think Mullins is coming back. I think if you're talking about a quarterback that could come back to the 49ers that is previous left, I think Nate Sudfeld has to be a name as far as depth-wise. He played for the league minimum last year that you look at potentially bringing in. I think he's a possibility to come back. I've heard other names, Marcus Mariota potentially. Now that you've got the move with Carr, I expect Jameis Winston to get released. Will Jameis Winston be looking for a reclamation project? I thought that's what he was trying to do in New Orleans, but his career have passed him by. So I do think that there's some options at the quarterback position as far as veterans. I think we'll know a lot more tomorrow. Brock Purdy has his surgery, and then after that, you'll have a pretty good idea of where Purdy sits. At least the team will. I don't know when we'll find out, but they'll know. And if it's a 6-month variety, I think they go with more of a low-priced free agent veteran. If it's a 9-month or 12-month variety, you could see them spend a little bit more and go more aggressive after a quarterback that they want to bring in. So I think this is going to be a fluid situation as far as quarterback position for sure. Bobo says re-signing Tyler Kroft and Josh Johnson is a must. Love that. Josh Johnson, definitely not right. I see that you're just kidding, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Kroft was, or Ross Dwelly came back as a 90-man roster spot and just see what they could do. Because the 49ers always do this before the draft. They like to sign players to their 90-man roster, veteran players that are tremendously cheap, because if you sign Kroft to a league minimum, he's not going to count against your top 51 contracts. And then when you get that way, if you get into the draft and you're unable to get the tight ends that you want, or you're not only able to get one and you want to get two, you have a veteran that you can count on. He's not on another football team. So I think that signing Kroft is potential there. Johnson, not so much. Kimmel says he looked good in camp. That would be good for sure. Great one. What's up, great one? Says Fioco at DN in the draft. I like him out of San Jose State. Bigger guy. Less built on speed, more built on aggressiveness and style. He can definitely handle setting the edge in the run. I want to see more from him. I haven't watched a lot of film. I think I've watched about half a game of him so far. So I need to get more into Fioco and just see, what he does against a variety of different teams. I want to see him against different competition. So yeah, I'll get more into him. I've been going through my breakdowns a little bit. I went down the rabbit hole of wide receivers one day. Lately I've been into cornerbacks. And I've went through some defensive tackles as well. But yeah, the draft process is a lot. Today was a lot of free agency, getting prepared for free agency and who the 49ers could sign, which players they might bring back. So I look to get more and more into the draft as we progress through free agency and into draft period. And then, of course, you know how it is. Into March, April is always heavy draft season. Yeah, so geez, Randy Daytona coming with the zingers there. Absolute zinger coming from Randy Daytona. Fantastic. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anyone here on potential guys, because there's lots of free agent edge rushers already. And the fact that I say that means that it's a completely saturated market. I'm just going to name off these names and you tell me these guys this makes this whole thing saturated and potentially good for the 49ers as far as cheap. Bud Dupree, Frank Clark, Robert Quinn, Brandon Graham, Yannick Ngakoue, Jadeveon Clowney, Matthew Ioannidis, Ashawn Robinson, Larry Ogunjobi, all those guys, Samson Ebukam, Arden Key, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Marcus Davenport. These Carlos Dunlap, these are Dante Fowler. These are all names that are free agents right now. And we're talking about the potential of them adding Carl Lawson from the Jets potentially getting released. Za'Darius Smith, Khalil Mack. These are all guys that could be released as well. To me, this market is absolutely saturated, which means the 49ers may have a potential to get a young guy, to get a guy on a cheap deal that could help their football team. And on Spotrac, the number 2 trending player right now is Za'Darius Smith. So Smith is definitely getting people's attention, and to see what his contract looks like and what could be going on. And that's what Jim was saying here. Names for days. It's crazy. It's great one says, you think Julian Brents will fall to us at 99? That's the thing. I think it's going to play out a little bit here. To see who ends up falling and who ends up, kind of catching fire and moving up the boards. I think there's going to be some movement. We've seen some already. One guy I was heavy on, Trey Dean, the safety out of Florida. I like him a lot. He ran a 4.75 at the combine. So automatically film went out the window and he went and dropped from, a into the 3rd round guy all the way to a 5th or 6th round guy. And the whole time I'm just like, really? Did that show on film? Did he look 4.75 on film? I think sometimes we put too much into those. So it's potential. You could see player fall to 99 that you think is going to be higher than that. Greg Jackson was a guy that I didn't break down a whole lot last year because I really believed he was going to be into 1st round, early 2nd round, and then he fell all the way to 61. So I am doing more due diligence. Thanks, John Lynch, for that. Due diligence to make sure I get all those names and try to figure out who's going to be in that area. So yeah, I think right now it's a possibility he could fall. We'll see what happens as we get closer and closer to the draft. Yeah, JLE says packed. Randy says we probably need that second DN to be a force. It's true. We do. Eric needs Josh Johnson needs to go play pickleball because his football days are done. I think they finally are. And you know, that's JL. He brought up Leonard Floyd. I didn't even talk about Leonard Floyd. He's going to potentially be a cap casualty from the Rams. Rams floating around, trading Matthew Stafford today as well. So Leonard Floyd, Zach Allen is already out there on the open market. I've seen a lot of people bringing up him. And, you know, Splash Cousin Jordan Elliott's been bringing up Jadeveon Clowney for the last few days, showing some film on him. I know a lot of people are concerned about Clowney. If you're concerned about Frank Clark's attitude, right, you're probably worried about Clowney as a teammate as well. And I'm sure those are things that the 49ers are going to take into account when they're making their free agent moves. I think free agency is going to be a lot of fun. I just can't wait for it. I think it's going to be exciting for sure. But I'm going to check out of here. Thanks everyone so much for coming through the live stream. I'm going to try to do more live streams, especially next week. It's going to heat up to a fever pace with free agency, and I'll be here for all your breaking news. You guys could jump on, talk to me, let me know what's going on with you. But thanks so much for coming through. I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. But until then, stay safe, and remember the right way is always the 49ers.